Well, it's pretty crazy to think, but 2 years ago, I redid all the front brakes and hubs and bearings on my Miata, and I said, coming up in the next video, I'm gonna tackle the rear. Well, 2 years have gone by and I got a little distracted. But I'm finally ready to tackle this job.
As it turns out, this job would turn into a total refurbishment of the whole back end of the Miata. Starting out in this episode with the uprights, wheel bearings and hubs, but then I'll move on to differential bushings, control arm bushings, and finally finish with the brakes. But everything is connected, so to start out, let's disassemble these old brakes. Everything is still working fine back here, it's just a bit crusty and old. The first thing I decided to do actually didn't need to happen to get the brakes apart, but I wanted to break loose the axle nuts in preparation for removing the hubs. These can be pretty stuck, so I had to resort to some different methods to get them loose. The passenger side I managed to get off without too much of a fight, but the driver's side, that was another story. I can't say I would recommend this method, but it worked. With that struggle behind me, I started working on the driver's side, disassembling everything, starting with the parking brake cable. Then I moved on to the rubber brake line, and I almost forgot there's a little metal clip you have to slide out first. I like to put a rubber cap over the hard line just so all the fluid doesn't leak everywhere, and clean up any fluid that drips because that stuff is corrosive. Then I could take the hose off of the caliper. Next I went to take off the caliper, and I kind of did this like a caveman. This isn't really the right way to do it if you actually cared, or if you're just changing brake pads. Normally you would take out the bottom slider pin bolt, and then you could pivot the front part of the caliper up and slide it off, and then take off the mounting bracket. But since I'm replacing all this stuff, I wasn't too worried about it. The same goes for the rotors. I'm sure there's a more careful way to take them off, but I resorted to the hammer. Now it's just a matter of repeating the whole process on the other side. The passenger side brake lines are a little different. The line from the front comes into this junction block, and then there's a crossover tube that goes over to the driver's side. This junction block is actually integrated with the rubber brake hose, and it attaches to the car with these two 10mm nuts. I had to make a little run to the auto parts store to borrow a tool, and while I was driving the Opel, I had an idea.
So this is completely unrelated to everything, but I realized since I have a couple of the Miata's wheels off, they have the same lug pattern as the Opel here. So I'm super curious what these 15x7 wheels are going to look like on the Opel, which currently has 13x6 wheels, I believe they are. So let's see if they even fit. Well, that is a different look. Wow. Not sure if the design works as well on here, but 15s are definitely viable. It's a very different look. Anyway, what was I doing? Oh. Okay, so next... Okay, so next I need to take the hubs off. Now supposedly in a perfect world, maybe when these cars were brand new, you could take the entire upright off and it would just slip off of the axle. Well, that's not the case anymore. Everything's kind of rusted together. So I'm gonna need to pull the hub off of the axle. And you don't really want to be hammering on the axle itself because you could damage the CV joint. So I'm gonna try to avoid that and use a tool that I rented from the auto parts store. This massive slide hammer with an adapter that doesn't fit.
Despite the adapter not fitting correctly, I decided to give it a shot anyway, and ruined 2 of my good lug nuts in the process, which was kind of stupid. Needless to say, this didn't work. So I went back and rented a different tool, and this time it worked.
Well, it worked. I think it's pretty common for half of the bearing to stay behind, so it makes it that much easier that we're replacing the hub at the same time, because otherwise I would have to get that off. And there's the rest of the bearing. But now we should be able to take the whole upright off. First, let's do the other side. Okay. There we go. Okay. Both the uprights are off. Something that's worth keeping in mind is there are bushings in here. So this piece is technically part of the suspension. And these are, 30-something-year-old rubber bushings. They still seem to be working fine, but it just so happens that I have a full set of polyurethane bushings that I've been procrastinating putting on this car. So right now is kind of the perfect opportunity to at least do the whole rear set. So I'll do those uprights as well as the control arms. Will I do that in this video, or will I do a whole video on the bushings separately? I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so now in order to prepare to take the old bearing out, let's take these old seals out. Oh, there we go. Old seal. Okay, next is this giant snap ring. Can I get it with the world's cheapest Harbor Freight snap ring pliers? Oh, that's heavy duty.
Finally, I borrowed some snap ring pliers that didn't suck, and guess what happened?
There it is. Oh, yeah. No problem. Come on out of there. There we go. Ho, 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 ho. Yep. Okay, the next thing is to get the old bearings out. And the correct way to do that is to use a hydraulic press. Thing is, I don't have a hydraulic press. And I don't really care about preserving these old bearings. They're already broken. So I might finagle a way to get them out here at home. But to install the new bearings, you really don't want to mess those up or damage them. So I may try to borrow a hydraulic press to install the new ones and the hubs. But for now, let me see if I can get these out.
What I ended up doing is just supporting the spindle and the vise, making sure it's being held from the strongest part, and just hammer out the old bearings since I don't care about them.
Ah, that worked pretty well. Okay, so that's the bearings out. I actually recommend hanging on to at least one of these, and you can use it as a tool to install the new one because obviously it's the perfect size. You might even consider putting this on a grinder or something and remove a bit of material around the outside so it's a little bit smaller so it doesn't get stuck in the bore. And that's the perfect tool to press in your new bearing with. But I'm going to spend some time cleaning up these uprights. I'm just leaving the dust shields on because they're pressed on and it's more trouble than it's worth to take them off, I think. So I'm going to spend some time cleaning and de-rusting and painting, making these pretty, and then we can hopefully press in some new bearings and hubs. Also, I'm going to leave these old rubber bushings in for the moment just to act as a mask for when I'm cleaning and painting and such.
After doing a bunch of scrubbing and degreasing and cleaning by hand, decided to give these a dip in some Evaporust. I let each one soak for about 2 hours and then came back, wiped it off with a wet cloth, and the results are really good.
Well, how about that? This stuff is amazing at cleaning, loosening stuff up. This original black paint on these uprights is actually in pretty good shape. And these shields are really good. As tempting as it is to just leave these like they are, shiny, I know there's not a whole lot of plating left on them, so they would rust pretty quickly. So I'm still gonna paint them black. I'll give everything a nice scuffing down, soak it with some brake clean or wax and grease remover. I'll clean out the bore for the bearing with some steel wool, make sure it's nice and smooth, and give these a nice coat of paint.
While those dry, let's take a look at the components I'm replacing. These new bearings, seals, and C-clips are by Timken, and the hubs I'm going with are Dorman. I was tempted to go with OEM Mazda hubs, but the price difference is pretty significant, and these should be good. Once the paint was all nice and dry on the uprights, I could bust out my trusty Harbor Freight ball joint press, which I've never actually used for ball joints, to press out the old bushings. With all of that done, I was ready to unmask these center bores, making sure again that they're nice and clean and smooth, and you can coat them with a little bit of oil to make sure they don't rust and give the new bearings a little lubrication. I ended up enlisting the help of a mechanic friend who has a hydraulic press, and just like I said earlier, we took one of the old bearings and ground it down quite a bit to make sure it's smaller than the bore so it won't get stuck, in order to use that as a tool to press in the new bearing. The important thing anytime you're using a hydraulic press is to make sure whatever part you're working on is supported in the right place so all the forces involved are going in the right direction. So we put this piece underneath to support the strongest part of the center bore. That's also the reason we're using the old bearing to push the new one in, because we want to apply the force on this outermost metal rim, also known as a race. If we were to push on the inner race, all that force would be going through the ball bearings to push this thing in, which would put wear and tear on it and possibly ruin it. You can always tell when it's time to stop when you can't push any further. And with the right equipment, this goes pretty smoothly. With the new bearings in, here's a little technique to install the new snap rings. Now when it comes to installing the hubs, we're going to be applying force to the inner bearing race, meaning we need something the right size to support it from the back. And once again, you can't go too far because these are designed with a hard stop, so they'll bottom out when they're all the way in. With that, I think we're good to go. Back at home, I went ahead and installed the new seals. Finally, I cleaned up the bushing holes a bit in preparation for the new bushings, but that's gonna have to wait for another episode. Going into this project, I had no idea I was gonna have an entire episode just devoted to the uprights, but here we are. Everything ends up being more work than you think it's gonna be, but I feel really good about the results, and I'm excited for the next stages.
Well, there you have it, 2 beautifully rebuilt rear uprights. Except for the bushings, these are ready to go back on the car. The problem is the car is not ready for them. There's a lot more work to do. I'm gonna do new control arm bushings, probably clean them up and paint them, differential bushings, all the brake stuff. So we still got some work to do. But I think this is a good place to break. I think I'm gonna have multiple episodes this time, so stay tuned for when I do the rest of this project and get everything back together. Peace.